like to remind everybody that we have 3 public hearings this evening. Public hearing number 1, which is what we're about to begin, is specifically to look at the change in the comprehensive land use plan for this property in the town of Waukesha. The next public hearing that we have scheduled is to deal with the rezoning of that piece of property. And then finally, the third public hearing is for a conditional use for that same property. So I think it would be helpful for everyone if you have a comment specific to the land use plan that you speak during the first public hearing. And if you have comments specific to the rezoning request, that you speak at the second. And if you have an issue related to the third, which is the conditional use request, that you speak then. It will hopefully prevent a lot of duplication. There's a lot of people here tonight, which is good to see. But I do want everybody to have a reasonable amount of time to speak. The public hearing is your opportunity to address the board. So I'll ask that everybody restrict their comments to the board. If you have questions, we will take diligent notes on your questions, and occasionally we'll pause in the public hearing, and if we need input from staff or the petitioner or commissioners or what have you, we'll make every attempt to answer all of those questions. But it is not an opportunity for debate or discussion between those speaking at the time and the petitioner. So I'll ask that you restrict your comments and concerns to the board specifically. Did I miss anything?
So we'll ask them to go once and not.
Oh, yes. And then also, if you could keep your comments to one appearance at the microphone until everybody's had an opportunity to speak, so that we don't get into a lot of back and forth. All right, very good. With that, the public hearing is open, and the mic is available to you. State your name and your address at the beginning, if you would, for the clerk.
Hi, my name is Richard Powers, and I've been out here shy of 50 years. South 54, West 2395, Woodmere Trace. My big concern is the church was built with a low profile attitude. Now we're going to throw in these large houses. I happen to live where I look right across at this. Now I'm going to be seeing these houses instead of looking at nature. And I think the other question we got is, what are you going to do with the wastewater? How is that going to be handled? There's plenty of water in the well, but what are you going to do with the other stuff?
Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. My name is John Rickards. My wife Kathy here. We live at South 54 West 23920 Woodmere Trace. We're got an honorable mention on your chart there this evening. Our concerns are multi from the standpoint we've lived in that property for the last 22 years and watched the development of those roads and whatnot. And well, I'm no fan of the pole barn either. We do like the natural effect of it all, but the concern, as Mr. Powers pointed out, we also share is the wastewater factor and the aquifer that would be most likely contaminated over time. I'm a multi-family dwelling owner in another state by just by coincidence. And I know that you do not really want to put these kinds of properties out in the wilds, if you will. There's no, the systems, the infrastructures for these kinds of structures and the complex nature of putting them all in one lump, as has been mentioned in some of the correspondence, leads you to have an overriding effect on the natural ability for the ecosystem to handle it all. You can tell me that the water's there. I have no doubt of that. I can dig about 3-4 feet down in my yard and I'll have water. That means my water table is pretty low, and that means it's pretty easily contaminated with a shallow aquifer or a waste disposal system. So our concerns are not only the fact that we're ruining a natural effect of the area, that's just mostly already that way. We're also putting the homes that are in the area currently and are spread out adequately to be handled, within the systems, are going to be compromised in this kind of an effort this far out of town where the infrastructure is there to support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Terry Cartwright, West 256, South 5084 Oakdale Drive. I've lived in the township for 66 years. Grew up on a farm. The DNR guy was talking about the level of clay. Clay will hold water up on top, okay? My major concern is what are you gonna do with the runoff? You're gonna have all these buildings, and you're gonna have parking lots, and you're gonna have driveways, that water has to go somewhere. The clay will keep it up on top. There's a house on Glendale Drive, right by the first 90-degree corner. I remember here a few years ago that they redid that over Pebble Creek. I remember driving through there in 2 feet of water. Okay? This water being held up by the clay, whether there's a berm or not, it is gonna seep through. Just in this recent thing, which wasn't that big of a deal, but yet that house on the corner had water from Pebble Creek 30 feet onto their lawn. Now you want to add this to it, that close. That's my concern. As far as the soil cleaning wastewater, that's not a problem. The earth has shown that it can do that time and time again. I grew up on a farm that had a 27-foot deep well. And we had 300 head of cattle. So, you know, that's not my concern, it's the runoff. Here, what was it, a year ago, we had 3.5 inches of rain in 2 days. Where is that water gonna go? How many people are gonna get flooded out? That's my concern. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Calvin Wade. I live on South 51 West 25151 on Glendale Road. And just from a couple of speakers that were talking earlier, Sean Malarkey, I think, was stating something about the traffic impact that this is going to have. And he stated only averages. And averages are fine if you're looking at all day long. But the problem is, I live on that road. I try to access 164. If I am trying to turn north on 164, during peak hours, peak rush hours, it is tough, it's difficult. There is a lot of traffic on that road. I've seen many people take unnecessary risks to try to get off Glendale Road onto 164. With this added traffic, while it may be an average, it is not pointing to the peak use times. So that's gonna be an issue. If they're not allowing access to 164 separate accesses, that's gonna be trouble, I guarantee it. Especially with the school buses and everything else that go through there at those peak times. It's not fun to get on that road. Also, the gentleman who spoke on the groundwater analysis, I found this a little bit interesting. He himself stated that he was contacted 8 days ago to make his analysis. Are you kidding me? Is 8 days long enough time to make a very accurate analysis of exactly how that groundwater, how the water is going to be affected? I kind of doubt it. It seems to me, and he even stated that he believes it's okay. When he believes it's okay, in my mind, it means he's guessing. I don't think that the town of Waukesha and the town board really can afford to take guesses and say that this is not going to be a problem. If it turns out to be a problem later on, this gets approved, you're opening yourself up to a whole lot of problem, a whole lot of difficulty. I mean, and you know as well as I do, it'll be lawsuits, it'll be everything else. That will not be good for the town of Waukesha if wells do get contaminated. That's all I got to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Gallo. My address is S53 West 23805 Glendale Road. I went to high school with John. He was a good guy back then. I'm sure he's still a fine guy. But my thoughts are he's going to profit from this, obviously. That's why he's doing it. And he's acquaintances with probably all of you up here, if not friends. I just don't see how anybody up here can make an unbiased decision on any of this. If I would come to the board and ask for the same thing, I don't think I'd even be standing here. People are using power for personal gain. That's the way I look at this. I moved to the city the town 27 years ago to be in a rural environment, and things are changing. And I'm afraid we're gonna have Blue Mountain Road going up and down here pretty soon. If we're making it an amendment to the town's comprehensive plan, that is a big deal. It's a real big deal. It's changing everything. So please consider that. I mean, look at all the people in this room. Do you think there's people here happy about this? Unless somebody's buying one of these properties, I don't think so. So, John, nothing against you, but I've been here 27 years. I enjoy, somebody mentioned pole barns. I don't mind looking at pole barns. That's why I'm out here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Paskevich, South 57, West 25392 Lois Lane. As a good follow-on to him, I'd like to voice my very serious concerns about the judgment of a town board hearing such a significant proposal from its own chairman. Surely you have at some point questioned how this looks to the residents and the taxpayers of this town. I will tell you how it looks to this taxpayer. It looks like a chairman is seeking to capitalize on a recent zoning change for his own benefit. It looks like an absence of ethics, and it looks corrupt. If it's not as sinister as it looks, then I ask Chairman Merrick, what is your priority? Is it the benefit of the town, or is it the benefit of John Merrick? I think tonight's meeting gives a very clear answer. Before you have made good on your pledge to find an alternate water source, before the promised improvements to the fire department and public works, you have brought before the board a proposal that benefits only you. I ask that the board get its priorities in order, and I advise the Chairman Merrick to reflect on how this looks. You've brought into question your character, your integrity, and your commitment to the town of Waukesha. I advise you to decide whether you serve the town or yourself and act accordingly. If you want to be a real estate developer,
Sir?
develop
Sir,
real
to
estate.
the board, please.
I'm addressing the chairman, sir.
No, sir, you're not. I've been elected the chairman, and I would ask you to keep your comments directed towards the board.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. We're also going to refrain from any outbursts. Okay, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for each individual to speak, no matter what their position on the subject. I will ask that future outbursts be restrained. Thank you.
The gentleman, or a couple of them who spoke just before me, my name is Betty Paget, South 57 West 22641 Woodside Court. I have written a letter both to the town board and the county board in favor of this development. If you would look at the development and the rapid filling of the development at Overlook, it is a beautiful development, well-planned, well-executed, saved as many trees as possible, and allowed a diverse group to move into that development. It's not just retirees, it's not just young people, it is all age groups are moving into that development. In the very short time, if 90% of it is, as he said, is developed, that means only 4 of them are empty in less than a year. There is a demand for this type of development. And I think this land use out here, especially if the land is given to the county as a corridor to keep it from being close to other close residential developments, is a wonderful idea. It will preserve that land for the green space that it is. It will be a great watershed area, and it will provide the town with a wonderful tax base, which we all know that we need to have in order to keep improving the town, in order to keep paying for snow removal, all of this without our taxes going sky high. So for that reason, I am in favor of this development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Theodore Peckel. I live at South 62 West 240 Town Line Road. Now, I am all in favor of somebody making a profit. I like making a profit myself. And I'm all in favor of development, possibly even housing in this area. But the issues that I have concerns with are, I bought a house once in my life, and when I looked for a house, I didn't look at houses without basements. Because a house without a basement is a lower class degrading property from the get-go. Now, I don't know if other people feel that way, but that's my opinion. So you're starting right off with building something that's degrading, especially when it's brand new, it's nice. But down the road, it's going to be something sitting on a slab. Now, a lot of developments, they've got some nice rentals in, is it Greendale? Which is a very classy community. But they didn't put basements in them. And they're now the ghetto of Greendale. You have a nice, I suppose you could eventually put a fence around it and put a lock and gate on it to keep the crime and so on and so forth in. Now, if, I don't know this for a fact, but I have talked to numerous firemen and police about issues as far as services that the cities have. Because they talk about, our fire department and our police department are taxed, we need more firemen, more policemen, this, that. Well, the long and short of it is this. I asked them, how many calls do you get for homeowners and how many calls do you get for rentals? And I got the idea was like 85% of the calls are always for people that are renting or rental units with both services. So you're gonna be really taxing, I don't know if we even have no offense, a real fire department as far as, full-time people all the time. But, if we start doing this, we're probably gonna start pushing that direction. We're probably gonna need more help from the town sheriff eventually from this. And no matter how nice this place is with stainless steel and granite countertops, all this stuff goes to the wayside within 15 years. It's gotta be redone. But who's gonna buy these places? Who's gonna reinvest that amount of money back into a place without a basement? Now, I don't think you could sell these as condos, because I don't think people would buy them as condos without a basement. So you're stuck with apartments. Now, like I say, my opinion is, to me, if you put basements in the places, and I prefer condos, development's gonna happen. I no doubt about it. I'm not gonna try to, how would you say, blow sand into the wind. But you're not talking about good quality product to start with. You're talking about something to make a profit. And a profit does not, that kind of profit's not gonna profit the town of Waukesha or the residents in Waukesha. You wanna have good quality housing, especially if you're gonna start bending the rules for this, that, and the other. Thank you.
Thank you. I think after this gentleman speaks, we'll take a few minutes and answer some questions.
My name is Steve Sensky. I live at South 44 West 23684 Whispering Hills Court. I'm actually one of John's neighbors. But I gotta tell you, this reeks of corruption. This gentleman said it, just hear me out, I'm talking now.
You can talk.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what you guys don't do. You guys don't listen.
Sir, you're not gonna make accusations of corruption to a group of people sitting on this board that are nowhere near substantiated.
Okay, let's,
I'm not gonna make
let's
that
look at it this
decision
way.
without interruption.
Okay, let's look at it this way. Where are the town's priorities when we have a fire station that's been approved for an addition that we're not doing anything about right now, but yet this gets pushed to the front of the line for somebody to take action on? We have to risk our groundwater, our wells for something that we all know eventually is gonna pollute the groundwater. No matter what you say, it's gonna get there. Our aquifer is just too shallow. This should not happen. None of us move to the town to see developments like this go up around us. There's a reason why people live in the town. Yes, it's the taxes. But you know what? I've been here for 25 years and my taxes have barely risen. We don't need a project like this to help our tax base right now. And if they go up, fine, they go up, but at least I have a well that's sound. You know, I just don't believe that this board can okay this request when you look at the people behind me and you see that nobody here is in favor of this. One person stood up, I'd be willing to bet there isn't another one in this crowd that's for this development. You know, I like John, he's a nice guy, but this does not belong in the town of Waukesha. If he wants to develop, fine, develop, find a place to develop. This is not the place for it. There's too much risk and there isn't enough benefit. Thank you.
We are not gonna have outbursts. So to answer a few questions, I'll start with what I have, and then the attorney and the clerk can keep me honest if I miss something.
The representative has to step forward. No, the gentleman in the tie is the man who's...
Yes, please.
Keep pointing at you. And if you need one of your other people to come up, that's fine.
Thank you. The first issue that I jotted down was about the church and the new houses in the rural atmosphere. I just wanted to point out so that everybody's aware that while this is currently zoned agriculture and environmental corridor, on the land use plan for both the town and the county, while the two disagree, the county is currently residential and the town's future land use plan is commercial office. Both of the plans call for this piece of property to be developed at some point. So the likelihood that this will stay rural forever is probably remote. It is slated for development and has been for quite some time. A lot of issues about wastewater. Wastewater is handled at the county level. They have the staff to do it. It's not an option for the town to manage it or address it. It's a county issue, so we're largely out of that loop. Where does the runoff go? That came up in a couple of speakers. There is a wastewater management plan. Do you want to discuss that? Or excuse me, stormwater, thank you.
This is the stormwater management.
Stormwater.
Yeah, all the drainage from the site is captured in the swale. It goes to our stormwater pond where it's treated. There's deeper areas, so it settles out and it discharges. If it gets that height, it'll discharge and go to the south into the wetland area. But this stay on site, and with our flat ditches, some of it's going to infiltrate. But there are no parking lots on it, it's just the driveways and the main road. So it's good someone mentioned parking lots. There are no parking lots. Everything goes in that southwest corner. And in the event it gets high enough, it just goes over and it goes into the wetland area.
And can you address who's responsible for reviewing stormwater and wastewater management plans?
That's Waukesha County, and then your own engineer takes a look at it too.
Okay.
And Alan Barros from the county, he won't give us approval if it doesn't meet all their requirements.
Okay, thank you. More issues about aquifer contaminations?
My name's Kevin Miller, and I did the soil testing for the septic system and for the stormwater management too. And I don't know if you wanted to ask me any questions about the septic or the soil.
Well, there were a number of comments about concerns about water contamination.
Right.
So,
Well, when we did the soil borings, we had the county come out. I think we did 25 borings for the septic area field. And we found adequate depth for in-ground conventional type systems. And that's totally code complying. I'm a certified soil tester, a professional soil scientist, and a designer of wastewater systems. And the conditions out there are perfect for putting in a conventional system.
and that would be conventional rather than mound?
Right, right. So there's actually below the upper soil loam, you have clay loam, and then the topsoil. Right below that is the glacial material, and it was a medium sand, and that's essentially what's brought in when someone installed a mound system. But that's there naturally to provide that excellent filtration and purification.
So is there a reason to believe that the wastewater or the runoff water would contaminate the drinking water?
I don't believe that's any remotely possible reason why.
And the county looks at that
Right,
and
right.
without,
Right, the county has on-sited, so we know that they've viewed the soil conditions. And in addition, they'll review any designs that we send up. So, and then they're gonna come out and inspect the system and do a construction check, so they'll make sure that the elevations are what was planned, so that, you know, everything is exactly as drawn. So, yeah, it's a very thorough, comprehensive method to, if any of you have ever had to set your septics replaced, you know, nothing really gets by them, so.
okay, thank you. Anybody, either of you have additional on wastewater, stormwater, and else?
Well, there was a question whether 8 days was long enough to do the analysis.
I'll start out by saying I couldn't say any more emphatically that contamination of drinking water wells, contamination of the drinking water aquifer is not an issue at this location. And and 8 days is plenty of time to look at soil borings and well logs and make that determination. Chapter 160 of the Wisconsin statutes, which I spent on special assignment to the secretary of the DNR, working with the legislature on over 2 years of my career in 1983 and 1984. Chapter 160 requires that every state agency, in things they regulate, which includes, in this case, soil absorption systems, septic systems, the things they regulate have to comply with state groundwater standards. The state agencies are required to meet that. The subject of this hearing is a change of the comprehensive plan. This is not a hearing on the exact design details of the soil absorption system. That will come much later in the process. This is on a change to the comprehensive plan, and we need to think about what's the current land use. If we're concerned about groundwater contamination, what's the land use, the future land use under the present comprehensive plan? Commercial, is that going to be less threatening to groundwater? Currently, it's cornfield, and there's probably more nitrate issues with respect to the cornfield out there and groundwater than there will be from the soil absorption system from sewage. So I think, again, the issue here is not the exact design details of the soil absorption system for sewage. It's whether or not the comprehensive plan ought to be amended and whether that or not that is in the public interest. And certainly with respect to contamination, as I indicated, I did a file review of what had been submitted and what concerns had been raised. And I think I had plenty of time and plenty of information to determine that there is not a groundwater, drinking water threat from this proposed change to the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Well, no, Sean has a hand up.
Oh.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I think there was one more question or comment related to traffic, and it was alluded to that the counts, that the peak traffic counts were not taken into consideration with respect to development. And the comment was mentioned that it was average traffic counts that were mentioned. Could you clarify exactly what the traffic counts were that were measured?
Sure. Daily traffic counts were measured over a period of 38 days, I think it was. We averaged 156 cars per day. I live at the Overlook. I have never pulled in or tried to pull out and had even one car stacked in front of me. Traffic is just not going to be an issue.
So one follow-up question. When you say average, that's not average hourly, that's the entire day.
That's the entire
That
day.
that includes the peak traffic
That includes
as part of that calculation.
That's the entire day. There's also some other questions about who's going to buy those properties. Nobody's going to buy them. I own them, and I'm going to keep them. They're going to remain in my family. They're a heritage for my children. It would not be in my best interest to build something that I thought was going to contaminate the ground. My plan is to put in nitrification tanks, a secondary form or aerobic tanks are sometimes called, of cleaning the water. By the time the water gets to the leach fields, it is far cleaner than any of the septic systems that are being discharged today with conventional septics or mounds.
I have one other issue, Mr. Merritt. The gentleman spoke about the quality of the product and the concerns about not having basements.
Sure. I don't have any concerns about not having basements. In my view, basements are a swimming pool you try to keep water out of. They're frequently causing water problems. We don't get any pushback from any of the folks that have leased the townhomes from us. And these are not low quality. If they were low quality, we certainly wouldn't be getting over $2,000 a month on average for these units. They're very high quality. They're granite, they're cherry cabinets, tiled floors, tiled kitchens and bathrooms. Who's gonna maintain them? I'm gonna maintain them. I own them. They're very, very nice. They are not low quality.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all that I had for a list of questions. If nobody else had any, then we can continue with the public.
David German, South 53, West 24395 Glendale Road. A few things. I understand how a septic system works. It's not the system that's the problem. It's from point A to B, the 400 feet of pipe that they're gonna be burying 2 feet in the ground through the system. I got told by Waukesha County that we should monitor our wells because if that pipe were to break, there's no way of knowing if it actually did or not. Secondly, the pond, filtration pond, if it overflows, it runs into my property. There's a cold water stream easily within 200 feet of this development. That was never brought up at all either. This is crazy. And simple. He's talking about traffic studies. Wisconsin DOT was out there yesterday doing a traffic study because apparently the developer did a personal traffic study. So the Wisconsin DOT actually got involved with it and they did one yesterday. I'd like to see those, what they came up with on that.
Thank you. No.
My name is Dale Siebert. I live in West 231, South 5977 Mahler Drive. I've lived there for 48 years now. Two concerns. One is how deep is the aquifer right now, and is there danger that it might drop to such a level that the neighboring subdivisions might have some of their wells dried up? The second point I have, I think, is more significant. Sometime in the late 1980s, early 1990s, I forget which, the 20 acres that backs up to the west of Model Drive was proposed to be developed into a subdivision, which it is now. It's called Trillium Woods. At the time, I stood right about here, addressed the Planning Commission, and I said, if you put a road through that woods, I don't know what's going to happen to the water flow. I said, what if building a road through that subdivision compacts the ground so much, and what if the water is currently running to the west? Will that create a dam and give me some water problems? The next year after that road was put in, I had a small area, only about 5 feet diameter, within the 15 feet to the back of my lot line, right next to the woods, that got very wet and killed 5 of my hostas. The next year it was okay, but the neighbor to the north has problems every year in his backyard. It's a quagmire. So he had to go hire his own backhoe and did his own work to deal with that water problem. To the north, there are 2 properties which hired people at $10,000 each to solve their water problem. Their water problem started 1 year after the subdivision was put in. So what I'm asking you is to take a look more seriously at the potential water problem that you might have, because that subdivision, in my estimation, was a serious error. We did require, some of us sued the developer, and they were required to put in a drainage system very, very deep along the road, and each house is supposed to be connected to that. The first few houses were connected to it, and then I'm not sure, but I was told that Mr. Skolovich, who owns the property, asked the commission to not have future people who bought the lots be connected, and that was successful on his part. So I'm just asking you to take a look more carefully at what might be a problem.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brad Anderson. I live at West 265, South 3700 Donald Drive here in the township. I know many of you on the board, and I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to talk about things here tonight. Some of you know I recently retired from the Sheriff's Department. Spent 30 years in the Sheriff's Department. 8 of those years I proudly patrolled the town of Waukesha. It was my district, it was my home, and I took a lot of pride in what we do out here. Some comments were made, and I'm going to talk to you briefly about what I know from my experience. Growing up, I grew up in Waukesha, moved to the town some years later. I've been in the town many years. Growing up, I knew several apartment complexes where I grew up. At the time, they were nice apartment complexes. The thing is, though, when an apartment complex, you have transient population. You have people that are there for a year, 2 years, maybe longer, but they're transient residents.
Sir, to the board, please.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
They're a transient population. Now, initially, a lot of, I forgot what the gentleman referred to it as, a densely populated residential development. I can tell you from my experience that in densely populated areas, densely populated residential areas, there are higher calls for service. It's just a fact. As time goes on with residential areas that are apartment complexes, the quality of life in those, from what I have seen, goes down. Case in point. Growing up, Hinman Avenue apartments in the city of Waukesha were very nice when I was growing up. Apartment complex on Sunset Drive across from what was Kmart in the day off of Big Bend Road. Very nice complexes growing up. The last 3 years of my career, I was on the U.S. Marshals Federal Task Force. I would go out with our team and we would look for violent criminal offenders. violent criminal offenders. Sadly, many times when we came into the Waukesha area, we were going to apartment complexes that 30 years ago were beautiful locations. I think what the board has to look at is a lot of times you're looking at the immediate future. You're looking at the next thing to worry about on your schedule. You're not thinking 10, 20, 30 years from now. And the quality of life that we have in the town of Waukesha, I won't trade it for anything. When I have people that are trying to move and find a home, I recommend move to the town of Waukesha. We have a great quality of life here. We have people that live in the town for decades because they want that quality of life. I can tell you that I have many friends on the fire department here. I don't think the fire department initially, I should say, I think the fire department initially can handle the influx of that population that's going to come in. But again, people, please think 10, 20, 30 years from now. And in my personal opinion, I don't think the relationship is the way it should be right now with the fire department and the town board. That's my opinion, but we have to look at long term. The area that they're talking about, I know the area well. I don't know again if the traffic can really take the impact of adding all those additional residents, because again, and I'm not trying to stereotype, I'm just telling you my experience. A lot of apartment complexes, you don't just have one family living in an apartment. You may have a family, but you didn't have family friends, you didn't have associates, you have boyfriends, you have girlfriends. That adds to the cars. So I would just ask you to please think long term. Don't think, okay, this is gonna work good in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 15, 20 years from now. And we all know what's happened with law enforcement service for the town. It's gone down. You decided to bring law enforcement services down, but you should be thinking of bringing more services. You're not thinking of services. You're not a service-based organization. 20, 30 years from now, what's the impact on the town? What's the impact on the people that are gonna live in the proximity of those apartment complexes? I can tell you from my experience, I don't wanna live next to an apartment complex. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, I've asked.
Good evening, Sandy Hamm, West 230, South 3827, Milky Way Road. My wife asked me why I was coming, because she figured everything was going to end up the same no matter what. I said, well, I'm just going to come and repeat myself. So many of you have heard me say this before. It's in disagreement with many of the people behind me, even many of my friends. But I would like to see the town be single-family units, and that each unit have 43,560 square feet. I'm not even in favor of crowding them together up on a dry piece of land and leaving a wetland down below and saying, look, we've got that green space. And I heard the magic word from one of the gentlemen, in perpetuity. There's no in perpetuity. I've come to this town meeting long enough to see you even change things that were theoretically in perpetuity, and then they get changed. So it's a green space for a while until 10, 20 years down the road, somebody looks at it and thinks it's wasteland, and they want to fill it in and put in more housing. And it's likely what is going to happen. Like the man said, you know, blowing sand in the wind. But that's what I'm for. And I think that addresses what this particular public hearing is about, is the comprehensive plan. I would really rather see where I am on Milky Way Road and whatever the fellow is up on the hill there to the south, you know, where they're going to put all the houses up on the hill, and down below they got the Butler Garter Snake, you know where it is, Ken. And, you know, no, I would rather see everybody get their 1 acre. And if that ends up leaving a bunch of wetland at the bottom that's undeveloped, so be it.
but I'm not in favor of crowding people together. And I did go to Madison, and when I wasn't in Madison, I was here. But I've been trained as a scientist, and it doesn't matter whether they're rats or bees or chickens or whatever it is. If you crowd them together, they change their behavior. And that's what the last fellow was saying. When you crowd people together, whether it's New York City or someplace out in Kansas, their behavior changes. And I would rather see things rather spread out than moved closer together. And it has nothing personal. It didn't change before this meeting. It has nothing to do with Mr. Merrick's proposal. That's been my position for 20 years coming to this meeting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Anthony Camomilli, South 52, West 23822 Glendale Road. I agree with a lot of the previous people that have spoke. I don't share the water concerns. I trust most of these people are professionals, and they wouldn't stake their career on phony science. Many of them do have a commercial stake in the project, maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them stand to benefit from the success of this project or not. Similarly to previous people, I came to Waukesha because I like the fact that it was single-family residences that was spread out, that there wasn't multifamily housing. It actually troubles me that some of those protections have been weakened in recent years since I moved here. I feel sort of negligent for not paying attention in that regard. I'm not going to charge the group here with corruption. I don't think that's the case. But the fact that this is coming in the way that it's coming does sort of smack at a lack of judgment, possibly, in a way that I didn't think would be possible. This isn't something I want to see happen. I think long-term it's going to have political repercussions in this community, and I would pledge the first $5,000 towards a recall for everyone involved in it. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of questions that have come up. Pond overflow and design. Can we talk about, someone had concerns about the design in the pond and if it overflows and those issues?
Sure. Currently now, the drainage leaves the site out right where the intersection of that cul-de-sac, it goes straight west. So, I mean, by law, we could put the pond there, control the water and let it discharge at that point. But I said, remember the county, and this was a better design. This pond here, when it overflows, it goes straight south. You mentioned 200 feet to the stream, it's more like 600 feet, and it's quite a ways away.
And straight south is what again?
I don't know the name of the creek, but it's
Yeah, it's not named creek, but that's county land, straight to the south.
Right.
And that's all currently environmental?
Correct.
Environmental corridor, correct.
So the water gets collected there, it's clean, and it's released at, a 100-year storm is released at a 10-year storm. So we're releasing less water than things go there. As far as the traffic study, I talked to John Eberts, the owner or president of Traffic Analysis and Design, who was out there doing traffic counts. He said that was unrelated to this development. They were doing counts for DOT. It's unrelated to this.
And the traffic study that's been quoted, do we know when that was taken?
They got the counter that was out there yesterday. Those counts will be in 2 weeks from those results are available.
Okay.
It's unrelated to this development.
I can have Wisconsin DOT email you stuff that they did. It was.
I don't want to get into a back and forth, please.
I'm just saying, I'll email you.
I don't want to get into a back and forth.
The study he's quoting isn't even for that
Come,
area.
let us finish with answering these questions, and then if you'd like to speak, you're welcome to, okay? Aquifer depth, there was questions about how deep is the aquifer here?
Well, I guess to be precise, there are multiple aquifers, and they go well over 1,000 feet. I can't tell you if it's 2,000 or 2,500. They go certainly as deep as the city of Waukesha's deep wells. There is both shallow groundwater here. relatively shallow, that is less than 20 feet, as well as deeper groundwater in the Silurian dolomite. And it's the Silurian dolomite, or also called the Niagara limestone, that's primarily used as drinking water sources.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, I had just one more, and this might be for Planner Malarkey. A gentleman talked about this being classified as densely populated and low density, and what that was all about. Could you speak to that, please?
Sure, I didn't make the remark that it was densely populated. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking or not, but in terms of overall density of the development, I don't have the number in front of me, but the total property is 34.29 acres with 40 residential units on the property. So it is it's just over 1 unit per acre on the property itself. I don't have the site plan in front of me, but I can look up the information.
And the petitioner, even though this is for land use, but this is where the question came up, is asking this to be classified as what?
So it's 1.16 units per acre. So when we talked about, the gentleman that came up before talked about, 43,560 square feet per unit. These are obviously clustered closer together than homes on 1 acre lots, but it's not much more dense than typical single-family residential on a gross basis than 1 home per 1 lot. So 1 home per 1 lot is 1 unit per acre. This is 1.16 units per acre overall. Now, obviously, some of it's preserved in open space, some of it's dedicated to the county, but overall, if you're looking at a 34-acre parcel, the density is just slightly higher than single-family on 1 unit per lot at 1 acre. So I'm not trying to spin it in any way. I'm just telling you that's how gross density is calculated. There's no magic math going on here. It's just when you look at a piece of property that's a certain size, how many units are on it, whether they're clustered together or not, that's how the density is calculated. 1.16 units per acre versus 1 unit per acre. It's a little higher than 1 home per 1 lot on a 1 acre lot.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that I had at this time. Okay, I believe you've spoken. You're welcome to do so again. I just want to make sure that all others have before we get into seconds.
I have a question.
So, if we may. Thank you.
My name is Stacy Powers, and I live at South 54 West 23955 Woodmere Trace. And I have a couple of concerns. 164 is a state highway, I understand that. However, we are governed by the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department. I'm not sure if most of these people or you guys understand that. 164 is mostly patrolled by the Big Bend Police Department now. And I wonder how the increased traffic is going to be handled if Big Bend is gonna pick it up for the Sheriff's Department, because there's people that are doing 70 miles an hour. My backyard is 164. And it needs to be controlled better, especially with increased traffic. And coming off of Glendale, is the DOT's plan to put in a stoplight there so that we do become a higher traffic area? And who is going to manage the policing of these areas? We used to have the Sheriff's Department in our neighborhood at least once a day. It might have been at 2 o'clock in the morning, but you saw them. Now we don't. And I'm concerned, like others, about the potentially increased crime rate. Whether they're paying $2,000 a month to live there or not, divide that by 4. That's average $500 a month. Well, I can go to the city of Waukesha and get that too, but it might not be the best neighborhood. So these are my concerns.
Thank you.
This is just a question about the housing per acre. It's been my past experience. What I've understood is there's like a 3-acre minimum in the town of Waukesha that was rescinded at one point in time. And I'm not arguing the 3-acre thing. The point I want to get to is this. It's been my understanding that when a developer comes and says, I want to build a planned housing development, and I don't want to have to put 3 acres, I want to make it an acre a house. It's always, my understanding is it's generally been, there's 100 acres, I want to put in 40 single-family lots or 60 single-family lots that are approximately 1 acre. Well, the balance of that is always donated to the county or to the town. There's always a quid pro quo type thing to lower the lot size per unit. That land gets put into perpetuity. Like say the land from Red Wing and other developments. Is he throwing a big wad of land into perpetuity for this, besides the 37 acres? And if he's not, how come he's getting, how come you're considering this kind of treatment for him, and not that he's, anybody knows? It's just how come you don't give this to Don Bellman if he's still building homes, or whoever else?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Buchholz, West 254 South 5030 Grutner Drive. I sat on the Plan Commission when we built the current master plan, and we spent many, many long hours doing that. Some of the members that were there are still sitting on the board today. There was a lot of thought given to what this property should be in the future and how the town would benefit most from that. Not looking at short range, looking at long range. Our thoughts then, and I believe they still should be today, is that we have a very limited commercial, industrial, and office space availability in our township. And Highway 164 is a corridor that is very desirable for that kind of development, as opposed to a little spot on Green Lane, a little spot on Anoka Avenue, and some of the other sites that the planner pointed out. We also looked at a study that was done in 2003 and was republished in 2017 that showed that commercial and industrial development is the tax support for the community. Residential development is the tax drain on the community. And it still is today. Still is today. Right now, the land is zoned agriculture, and that supports the town's mission plan, which states that they're going to promote agriculture in our community. So currently the zoning supports the master, or I should say, the mission plan that is printed for the town. And the land use that we have proposed is consistent with what we thought then and I support now.
Thank you.
And Sandy Hamm again, I won't take but a minute of your time. You learn in school that you can prove anything with statistics, and I'm not taking issue with the definition of density or anything else, but I can tell you that if we took all of the people in this room and we moved them all to the other side of the dais, it would feel a whole lot different than when they're spread out like this. So I go back to the fact that, I don't care what the overall density is. I'm talking about the reality of the density. If I have a big, huge house and I have 10 kids and I put them all in one bedroom, that's real different than if they each get their own bedroom. So I just haven't changed in 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish to speak again because there are a couple of points that need to be cleared up. First of all, this is not the first development and change of zoning by a town chairman. It has been done before in this town. It is not the first time land has been rezoned. We moved out where we live, it was agriculture. Now it's residential estates. That was done by the board. So it's not the first time that this has happened. Secondly, a lot of us live on cul-de-sacs where we live close together. We might have land in the back like this is going to have, but we live close together. And many of people in the town live like that, and we get along just fine. We don't have crime because we have quality housing.
Thank you.
Al Collins, Partridge Lane, South 51 West 23072. I have a document here about the powers and the duties of the Waukesha Town Board. And I looked through the whole thing word for word. Nowhere in there does it say anything about rezoning and changing zoning as being one of the major things that you're supposed to be dealing with. I mean, we're gonna be here every week trying to make more zoning changes. I'm a real estate broker, and I sold some of those houses in that area to those people who are now on my case because I showed them the zoning map, and now they're saying, Al, now you're gonna change it? Are they gonna take action against me, and who do I take action against? And we can't just keep making these zoning changes. The environmental report, I don't see any. Are we gonna get one to look at? How this is gonna impact the area? And as far as the traffic is concerned, I live on Partridge Lane. It's 25, they're going down 50, 60 miles an hour now. That's gonna be a shortcut to get to this project. It's gonna double, it's gonna triple, because they're gonna want to avoid 164, I would too. As far as the leaching thing, how do you leach 15,000 gallons of contaminated water in one day, if you figure 75 gallons per unit, with a shallow aquifer? You're not going to build a basement. There's not enough room in there to leach it, in my opinion. I'm not an expert, but I know what it means to build a new well. I've been there. 15,000, 20,000 bucks. I think we better think this over real careful. Where does this end? Who's going to want to do this next week and have another development? It's zoned the way it's zoned. We can't change horses in the middle of the stream. I told these people that that's what was going to be, the way the map said. Now you're going to change it. Now how does that make me look? And you? Thank you.
Thank you. Address a couple of items regarding the policing and Highway 164 and the gentleman from Partridge Lane. We'll certainly refer that to the sheriff. If you notice it in particular times of the day, you can certainly call the town at any time, and we'll do what we can to keep the sheriff in those areas. If you really want to take it up, she's standing right in the back. Desirability for commercial that the gentleman spoke about. That is probably my chief concern, and I've done a fair amount of looking into if this is an appropriate use for that land. I've been coming to town board and planning commission meetings for far longer than I've sat on this side of the table, and to the gentleman's credit, for as long as I've been coming to planning commission meetings, I've been listening to Mr. Buchholz talk about the need for commercial development in the town. And he's right, it goes way back. So that was a chief concern of mine in this project, and still is. Because the corridor does lend itself to commercial. So I tried to understand, first of all, the fact that this hasn't been on the tax roll at all for the past 25 years, which was mentioned by the petitioner in their opening comments. And then I tried to understand if it does come back on the tax rolls as this project, or if it comes back as on the tax rolls as the way it's currently on the land use plan, commercial office use, how does that benefit the town? Because when we have development in the town does benefit. It increases the tax base, especially on a piece of property that we collect no taxes on currently. The nearest piece of land that I could understand what this could be someday, although it's not exactly the same, is Rockwood Way. It's a similar size. It's light industrial, it's not office space, but it is commercial, but more of a light industrial base. Mr. Merrick's combined properties is in the ballpark of 35 acres. And those two combined pieces of land are 35 acres. Excuse me, 55 acres, I'm sorry. But there's one piece of land that's 18 acres that has a significant portion of environmental corridor on it that's essentially not buildable. That's on Pine Hollow. So I looked at the 2017 town taxes paid by all those units over the, as I said, 2017. And it comes, and this is just for the town portion of taxes. So I'm not talking about their total tax bill, property taxes, which of course is much higher. And that comes to about $18,000 in 2017. At the time I looked into it, it's the latest data that was published. So this is the taxes that they paid last year, not just recently. And then I tried to understand that, how it relates to Mr. Merrick's current project, which is almost complete. So the project that Mr. Merrick has going on just off of Greenfield is 26 acres, has the same number of units on it. Prior to Mr. Merrick starting his project, it was assessed at about $200,000 or $250,000. This current tax bill, it was just assessed at $1 million. And I spoke with the assessor. He is not done with the analysis, but given that this is a partial year and he's finishing his construction, in this year he expects it to be at about 2.5 or 2.3 million for this year. And then next year, when it's a completed project for the entire year, to be something over, just a little bit over $5 million. So in the $5 to $6 million tax range, assessed range, that comes out to about $10,000 of town taxes. On a piece of property that I don't disagree lends itself well to commercial, but we also have to consider what is the likelihood that somebody's going to come and do that. As the petitioner mentioned, this property has been available for sale for quite some time. I think almost as long as I've lived here, which is about 15 years. The school district is not going to build there, and they haven't been shy about that.
Are you making comments as a citizen or the town chairman? Because I'm
No.
not in favor of it.
I'm not, no, I started this with that I wasn't, and I'm making comments to the gentleman who spoke on the desirability for it to be commercial. That's the specific, and it's a concern that I have. And so therefore I have a fair amount of research on it. So that's the specific question I'm addressing. So then I have to ask, how does that balance out? So, to the gentleman who has spent many years in service to this town on this planning commission and as the fire chief, while I have not made a decision, that's the decision that I struggle with. And because I've listened to him for many years talk about commercial development. So that answers that question. Do we want to address the powers and the duties of the town board to rezone?
We can, and that's set forth in the state statute, and that's set forth in the state statute, 6223, parent 7, and in the zoning code. So the gentleman probably looked at chapter 60, powers and duties of the town board, which are spelled out, but it's a different state statute and a different code section. But it's certainly, he can check with the county. The rezoning, which isn't what this public hearing is about, is also needs to be approved by the county.
For the petitioner, an environmental report was questioned.
I guess I'm not sure what kind of environmental report is being sought. We've got the delineation has been completed, stormwater management reports have been completed. wastewater management preliminaries have been done and soil boring submitted to the county. I guess I'm not sure what type of environmental report is being sought.
Planner Malarkey, are there any other environmental reports that would be required?
No, in addition, you've also prepared the groundwater report that was recently done as well. I think you may just be referring to a general, looking for some kind of a report that states whether or not there would be an adverse impact to the environmental surrounding this. Now, in terms of what you presented and what you supplied, the wetland determination sets the boundary for the wetland. That wetland's not to be disturbed. There'll be a buffer associated with it. And as far as I understand, you plan to deed that to Waukesha County for protection in perpetuity, correct?
That's correct.
What we've learned so far from the groundwater determination report, based on what was supplied by Mr. Kessler, he has concluded that there'd be no adverse impacts to the groundwater or the aquifers based on his study of the soil borings. The stormwater information has been submitted. It's preliminary now. The county has reviewed that. Alan Burris at the county has taken a look at that as part of our DRT meeting with them. I spoke to him today just to follow up with him to see if he had any additional comments on the stormwater report. He indicated that there was nothing unusual here about this. He didn't see any potential red flags in terms of what's going on. They haven't done their final evaluation on it, but that's something that's going to be done. And any approvals that we condition, that would happen from the town would be conditioned on approval of the stormwater report from them. So as far as I know, that's what's been done for environmental concerns. I don't have any particular concerns as it relates to the environment. Chris, do you have any?
No, I don't, but I was just gonna comment that the wetland delineation that was done also has an assessment of the wetlands that was performed, so there's a good description of what they are in that report.
Is that report available for public viewing on the website, or is that available here at the town hall?
Which report is that?
The wetland determination and assessment report.
If it's not already on, if it was not in the packet, it would be able to be viewed here, yes.
Yeah, so if someone wants to view it, they can come into the town and take a look at it.
Okay, very good, thank you. That's all that I had.
Mr. Chairman, can I address a couple of items that were brought up?
Sure.
First of all, the road study that was done in the last few days, that was a study that was done for the DOT for Highway 164 unrelated. There was a comment made that we were going to have 400 feet of sewer pipe buried 2 feet deep. It's absolutely incorrect. It will be buried below the frost line. These are not apartments. These are very high-end luxury townhomes. They primarily have 2 bedrooms. They rent for $2,000 and change per month. There's no room for 4 people, for 4 separate people. There's not 4 bedrooms. It's not a standard apartment community. There was a comment made about how am I going to treat 15,000 gallons a day? I'm not. At Overlook, we have 38 units rented, and we have 66 residents. If you use the same math that was brought up, at 75 gallons per person, that's about 4,900 gallons a day. That's about 60% of what the state allows on a single property with a single system. That's all I got.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Robert Griesmer, I live at South 58 West 23380 Glengarry Road. 2 issues. One, Mr. Seaver was talking about the Trillium Woods subdivision. We are the benefactor of the runoff from there. That flows across Marcel Road and goes, it's not Marcel, it's whatever. Anyways, it flows under the road into a pond. That pond is then culverted under Glengarry Road, runs between my property and the one next door. And whenever it rains, there's a stream of water that comes through there. So there is runoff from there. And that was the lawsuit settlement so that they could build that subdivision. What that does is that the bottom 100 feet of our lot, which is a 3-acre lot, because in 2002, we were forced to buy 3 acres. I don't know when you changed that rule, but I'll address that in a minute. The bottom 100 feet of our lot, I cannot cut the grass down there until well into June because it's a wetland. This is from the runoff from our cell. Second issue is that, as I said, we had to buy 3 acres. We could not get less. We bought the 3-acre lot next to us to protect the green space. So from what I'm hearing now, if you're going to rezone this, then I should be able to put 3 homes on that 3 acres. Is this the precedent you're setting today? And I think you need to look hard and long at that because this is going to affect the town of Waukesha.
Thank you. Planner Malarkey, can you talk about the various zoning designations and how they work in the town?
Sure. The town of Waukesha has a range of zoning designations that were in place long before I got here. I don't know when the code was drafted, but for a number of years, the town has had residential districts that range in lot size from 3 acres down to about 20,000 square feet. So R3 zoning allows lots of 20,000 square feet, a minimum 20,000 square feet in area. R1 is 1 acre in area. RE and RSE are approximately 2 acres and 3 acre minimum lot sizes as well. So those are the residential districts in the town. Where you can apply those zoning districts is based on what the comprehensive plan says. So if the comprehensive plan lists a particular gross density that would match up with a particular zoning district, you'd be allowed to do 3-acre lots. And if it allows more density, you might be able to get 1-acre lots or 20,000 square foot lots. So it's not distributed uniformly across the town. You can't necessarily request a 1-acre lot or a 20,000 square foot lot anywhere. It's got to match up to where the plan says that's the case. So tonight what's being asked is for the plan to change from what it currently is as commercial. You can't do any residential now. So what's being asked is to change that to rural residential. And there's a particular density that's associated with that would coincide with the R2 zoning that's being requested, in addition to the conditional use PUD. So it varies depending on what the comprehensive plan says in terms of what the lot sizes are that would be applied.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments from the board? I'm sorry, ma'am. Were you going to get up? Please.
Angie Bansock, South 51, West 25375, Glendale Road, Town of Waukesha. And I've listened and waited to speak because I was curious as to how the residents feel about this, because after many, many, many years, decades on the Town Plan Commission, helping craft the zoning code. As Mr. Buchholz mentioned, we spent a lot of time and a lot of review looking at the environmental issues related to the zoning and future zoning that we looked at in these areas. And this particular land has been under development request in the past and was rejected because of the issues related to its sensitive nature. It does have environmental corridor near it. So it certainly can be developed, but it needs to be developed in a reasonable way that preserves the integrity of the environmental corridor that it's next to. We felt as though commercial would be an appropriate area there. We have the ability on the Plan Commission on the town board to designate what type of commercial that would be. We did not envision whole buildings. And the gentleman that sat with me on the board and Plan Commission at that time know very well that we talked about the type of office buildings that might be there that would be very well placed, that would not have basements to preserve the area, and that would be light on traffic. Because all of those things, there were things that we looked at for that time. In the old days, we had to charge for that. Anyway, before I get into my real comments, which I've written down, I want to say I feel like I'm in point counterpoint tonight. This is the strangest public hearing I've ever attended. I mean, typically the public speaks. We don't have the experts that are hired by, the particular developer do point counterpoint. So I would say we have to keep in mind that the gentlemen, I'm sure they're very qualified, but they are still paid by the developer. And we need to make decisions with the information that we have from those people that are hired by the town and through your own knowledge and experience to make the decisions as well, in addition to the information that's presented by the petitioner. But the fact is, in April of 2013, John Merrick was elected chairman of the town of Waukesha, and many changes have commenced in the town since then. The following is just the implications and ramifications of one of those changes. In May 2015, the town of Waukesha Town Board changed the zoning code. Prior to that date, the code read, no more than a 2-unit structure may be considered unless connected to municipal. I'm sorry, I don't hear well if there's transient noise. No more than a 2-unit structure may be considered unless connected to municipal sewer system, which means no more than a duplex, a 2-family unit, 1, could be constructed in the town of Waukesha unless it was connected to municipal sewer system, city sewer, okay? It also said, these units shall only be permitted in areas contiguous to the city of Waukesha limits on an arterial or collector street as defined in the town of Waukesha Land Division Ordinance. In 2015, this group made changes related to that and removed those requirements. That means that multifamily property, where it was limited in the past, could not be built in the town of Waukesha unless it was on municipal sewer, can now be built anywhere in the town. That is a major change to, as many people have mentioned, what they expected when they bought a piece of property and built a home or purchased an existing home in the town. People did not expect multifamily property, be it a 2-family, 4-family, or 40-unit property, apartment building, next to them. Nobody anticipated that because for decades and decades, until May of 2015, that was the rule of law here in the town of Waukesha. The change now allows developers to ask to place non-owner occupied multifamily rental units anywhere in the town, fundamentally changing the town. To date, Chairman John Merrick appears to be the sole person who has utilized these new provisions, but it certainly isn't limited to him and can be any developer that would approach the town. We who love the town do so for the open space and owner-occupied neighbors who pay property taxes and are not simply transient, temporary dwellers. If we wanted to live in the city with all of its rental units, we would have purchased property there. We do not want the rural nature of the town to change by being overrun by large rental communities. Anyone can see how badly they fare just by looking at examples in the city of Waukesha. In November of 2015, there was a public hearing for Chairman John Merrick's Overlook development, proposing a 42 rental unit development. It is in the process of being completed. In June of 2017, John Merrick's father, Richard Merrick, formed Rolling Meadows Townhomes, which is the purchaser, proposed purchaser of the property from the school district. In August of 2017, John Merrick's parents sold their home in the town of Waukesha after living there for many years, at least back to 2000. In October of 2017, Richard Merrick, through Rolling Meadows Townhomes, accepted a counteroffer from the school district of Waukesha to purchase approximately 35 acres of property near the corner of 164 and Glendale, far from any city boundary, from the school district of Waukesha. In January of 2018, John Merrick sold his home in the town of Waukesha and has apparently moved into his apartment complex. Under John Merrick's chairmanship, decades-old ordinances were changed to facilitate the development of multifamily buildings in all areas of the town of Waukesha. John Merrick, in making his case to the county for comprehensive plan change, and in town hall recently, stated the town has a number of 4 families to prove he did not introduce multifamily to our town. In fact, there are exactly 3 4-family buildings, the largest size we have, other than John's, in the town. Per property records, one dates back to 1930, one 1936, and the last 1947, because there was a general prohibition to multifamily in the majority of the town. According to property records, John Merrick, through his LLC, is the only owner of dense multifamily residential property in the town to date. Through recent sales of their homes, John Merrick and his family appear to be abandoning ownership of single-family homes in the town of Waukesha, while changing the very fabric of our community from single-family home ownership to absentee landlord ownership. Nobody's going to believe that people and developers who come into the town to develop multifamily are all going to live within that rental community. That is typically not how it works. I personally object to the changes made to multifamily in the town and ask that this proposal be rejected on all levels. We do not want to be the city of Waukesha. We want to maintain our single-family residential, owner-occupied charm, which is the fabric of our town. Thank you.
The next meeting we'll do in a clear room. And we'll bring people in one at a time to make their opinions known to the board.
Freedom of speech.
Not here.
Recall.
Mr. Petitioner, one of the issues that I had written down that we neglected to address was the donation of land.
Yes.
Is there any donation of land or anything of that sort being done?
Yes, two points I think were made there. One, that it is a required thing, that once a developer is building a subdivision, that he would be required to donate some land to a county or some other municipal, and that's not accurate. In this case, yes, I am donating all of the wetlands, all of Conservancy area back to Waukesha County.
Okay, thank you. And then, as I was speaking to the gentleman's concerns about the reclass or the need for desirable commercial in the town, because it was something that I had looked into. You were not at the microphone. Is there anything that you wanted to address on that?
Sure. One of the things I do for a living is develop property. It's clearly evident that after 25 years, there hasn't been an office building built there. I would never consider building an office building there. It's what I do for a living. Other people that do this for a living also haven't even considered it because it's not the right place for an office building. It's not the right place for commercial. There's going to be $5 million of tax base added to this property where there's now none and hasn't been any. And maybe you're going to go another 25 years with nothing. These are not some low-end units. The rents on these places are more than I would venture a guess than everybody in here's mortgage. These are very high-end units. The people that live here are doctors, accountants, professionals of all sorts. They're not transient. These people are here, most of those leases are 3 and 4 years.
Thank you. Is there anything from the board that wanted to address, any questions from the board that wanted to address the public hearing of the amended land use?
I've actually got 5 areas of inquiry looking for information. Mr. Chairman, I can either give you all of them at once or one at a time, whatever your pleasure.
Whatever you're comfortable with, sir.
I'm comfortable either way.
Let's have them.
All right, let's start. Number 1 would be, and I'm wondering perhaps, and I'm sorry to catch your name, but the gentleman who was introduced as the architect, if you could speak, you spoke at some length about the interiors of the buildings with granite countertops, cherry cabinets, and so forth. I didn't hear anything said about exterior materials at all. So that's one area of inquiry. Do you want to take them one at a time, or?
No, let's lay them out.
Okay. So that's,
So that was exterior.
yeah, that's an area of inquiry. If something was said about that, I missed it. The second would be just about, and I did in fact make in January the request for the cut-fill balance. I looked at the proposed floor level elevations for the multiple buildings. Some of those are as much as 6 feet above existing grade, assuming there's topsoil and so forth to be cut out of there. I imagine some of those could be 7 or 8 feet of fill underneath these proposed slabs on grade. I guess I'd like to know where that material is coming from. I understand for the wet pond, you'd be doing some excavating. Begs the question of whether that's appropriate material for filling underneath those. And again, not meant to be disrespectful, but to offer that cut-fill balance thing at the start of a public hearing is not appropriate. To have an opportunity to take a look at that. So from my perspective, that's an unfulfilled request. The next question I would have probably is best answered by Planner Malarkey, and it's something that had not occurred to me previously, but I know we spent an awful lot of time in the past and made some revisions to minimum lot size widths, both on straight roads and cul-de-sacs and things of that nature, and residential use or occupancy. I guess I would ask you to give a little bit of thought, or maybe can respond to if indeed the access to this is off of Glendale Road and that's a 75-foot strip of land. Is there a way that we can explain or justify or get that to fit into what's the required minimum lot size for lot width for residential usage? We went at great length to talk about minimum lot width at building setback lines. We went at great length with that, so I think that's something that ought to be addressed. The fourth area of inquiry that I've got that might, Mr. Chairman, ask for a response, both, I think it's from Mr. Kessler, if that was your name correctly, and I'm not sure the other gentleman who spoke to the testing that has been done on site for the on-site proposed on-site sewage disposal systems, and there appears to be, at least to me, somewhat of a contradiction, and you may well be able to clarify that, but the impact that I got, Mr. Kessler, from your presentation is the belief, and I wrote it down, that there's a significant amount or layers of impervious clay which would protect, if you will, against contamination of the aquifer. Obviously, we talk about trying to protect that aquifer. We're talking about trying to do infiltration for on-site sewage effluent or that type of thing. They kind of pull in opposite directions. But my question, I guess, directly to you is going to be, I know you said you looked at public comments that I think came from Waukesha County and maybe looked at well logs or something. My question is whether you looked at, and I thought the gentleman said there were 25 test bores or pits or what or not that were done, whether you looked at his information in detail, because I thought, and I'm certainly not intending to put words in professionals' mouths, but I thought, and I beg I didn't catch your name, sir, but I thought you had indicated that a lot of those underlying soils were sand, which would be just dandy for infiltration for wastewater. So those things seem to me to be in contradiction with one another. So we get to that, maybe you can help resolve that. Are we talking about general observations of well logs in the area? Are we talking about site-specific testing? So we get that. My last item of inquiry or concern here, and this goes a bit to Planner Malarkey, and if I jotted this down wrong or misunderstood, but I thought in your presentation when you spoke to public participation procedures, and you spoke to the meeting that is to be held on April 18th to fulfill the requirements of the section 66.101 4A of the Wisconsin statutes for public participation in comprehensive plan use amendments. I thought you said that that meeting was scheduled, but whether it takes place might depend on the outcome of tonight's meeting. And if I misunderstood that, please, when you get a chance, correct me. I guess I find that a bit puzzling, how what happens tonight might affect whether or not that public hearing is held at that point in time. And I'm concerned in the bigger picture part of it as to whether or not, and I appreciate your opinion on that, or Attorney Macy's or that type of thing, whether it's appropriate when we get to that point to close this public hearing if that public participation hearing mandated by state statutes is pending, which talks to the more global issue of land use and land planning in the town of Waukesha. So those are my areas of inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board members?
And this one's probably from Mr. Kessler. There's been, people have come to me and said they've seen water standing on that property after rainfall. Now, how do you explain that? Because I've seen the water sitting on that property myself. Is the timing of those borings have anything to do with that? As far as what you say is no, the groundwater is not that high? Because I've seen water sitting in that field. I live near there. Now, I think those borings were done, if I'm not mistaken, in October, maybe even later. December. There wasn't a whole lot of rainfall this fall.
We did. Okay, wait, we'll take the questions in a group.
So I'm kind of concerned, or I'm questioning why you're saying that the groundwater is so low, but yet when we get, it may happen in the dry period, because we really didn't have a whole lot of rain this fall. We had heavy rains in the spring and in early summer, but after that, it pretty much dried up as far as rainfall goes. And that wetland is pretty level with that. Now, if you've got heavy water sitting in that wetland at certain times of the year, is that going to soak into the ground next to it and create the higher water table? And they happen to be that this time of year, when there's no rainfall, you're going to have it down. Is that possible, or how do you explain that?
Thank you. White.
Thank you. I have a question. The overflow storm water that's going to head to the south into the wetlands. I'm sorry. I'll start over. I'm still questioning the overflow of the storm water into the wetlands area that we're still looking into, and how that's going to impact the wetland areas. Second, we've been dancing around the distance that Red Wing Creek from the development is and where the storm water would be going into that. I think we need a delineation exactly where that wetland area is from that creek where that cold water stream is. If it isn't, or if it is, I think we need a determination exactly where it is. Instead of be us dancing around that for the last 2 meetings.
Thank you.
Got a couple more.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm with Brian with the exterior of these buildings. I think we still need some maybe different materials if we had option on these. I think that would be in discussion later on if this passes, and with the setbacks also on that property. I think the uses of water in these rental places compared to a homeowner are a lot higher. I think that, I know when I go out or vacation, I might take a 15-minute shower than a 2-minute shower. So I think these waters, gallons per minute per units are low, on the low side, that they're predicting in their estimates that they're predicting. And last is the traffic study that's been taking place. I guess I would like to see if, I'm not sure who all did it, but I'd like to see the town do their own traffic study and come up with their own study and findings on that. Because I still believe there's a traffic peak times that are gonna be a safety issue at that intersection. Thank you.
Any other, where do we, well, let's address these. So we want to start with the exterior?
Sure. We, Supervisor Fisher, you asked about this last time that we met. What we did is we added some shakes to the gable ends. We changed the doors out to a carriage-style door. The architect and I played around extensively with trying to find different materials to put, but there's so little space on the front of the buildings, and no matter what we did, it just looked unbalanced and uncompleted. And so we changed the doors to the carriage doors, added the shakes, and that gave a really good appearance to the product, I think. If you guys want me to put on brick, we'll put some brick on. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You're talking a de minimis amount of money, so it's not the money. It just didn't look good.
Okay. Floor levels?
The cut and fills are what they are. They're off of a computer. You can't fake it. The computer, you put in the elevations, the computer shades the paper, red for cuts, blue for fills. They are what they are. It just, I don't understand how it's being questioned.
Okay.
Could we respectfully have, is it Mr. Maloney, did you generate that report?
He did not. It was done by the grader.
Who did it?
The grader, D&L grading.
Okay, it doesn't, I'll ask the question of you, but I guess what I would like to know, again, my concern on that is, I'm not gonna look at that and review it tonight. That's not the purpose of a public hearing. But, I mean, and that thing, for how many acres of land, looks like it fits on a small part of the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Even if I had that tonight, would make a lot of sense out of it. Does that take into, I'm not gonna look at it, that takes in the proposed elevation of all of the floor elevations of the proposed buildings is reflected on that drawing? You don't even have to answer that, but that's going to be my question.
The answer is yes.
And where does the fill material come from? That's
From the cuts.
correct there.
From the cuts.
And where are the cuts?
Cuts are red, fills are blue.
It's the stormwater pond.
Largely.
All right, and that material is suitable, some geotech or something has pronounced that material suitable for building up some of the places 6 to 8 feet under the floor slabs of the building?
I don't know that it's 6 to 8 feet, but nonetheless, yes.
Well, it is. Take a look at the site plan. I'll represent to you it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Minimum lot width, I believe was your next question. I think you had that for Planner Malarkey, is that right?
I'm sorry, Mr. Fisher, could you please clarify what you're asking on that one?
Yeah, what I'm asking, when we looked at it, and perhaps that was even a bit before you when Planner Barczyk was here, but we spent in workshops, Planning Commission, town board members, we spent an inordinate amount of time looking at minimum lot widths that were prescribed for all of the residential occupancies in the zoning ordinance. Some of those were reduced, they were clarified, part of it in response to a kind of a thorny issue that we got involved with how and where to measure lot width. So my question is, and I understand that this is a particular type of development, is this considered a lot or not? And what then is the minimum lot width and where it's measured? And it gets down to that 75-foot strip that's the access part. I'm looking to clarify that or reconcile that with what we did. I mean, I guess to put it another way, you couldn't build, I don't believe, in our 3 single-family residents on a 75-foot wide lot. So I'm trying to get some clarification or comfort or understanding of how we get to that if the access is off of Dundale Road.
Sure, but I guess the way lots are determined is whether they have frontage not just on Glendale Road in this case, but the lot side frontage on 164 as well. So it's all about frontage in terms of how width is determined. So are you saying, so it would be a flag lot, it would be determined, it would be considered a flag lot if there wasn't access on 164, but there is. So it's not necessarily determined to be a flag lot, if that's what you're asking.
But the access is not going to be used from there? I mean, are these going to have addresses on Glendale Road?
I don't know if, I assume it will be because that's where the access point is from, but we're not, I guess we're not asking to create this lot at this point. It exists now with that 75-foot strip. The way lot widths are measured is at the building setback line.
I understand that.
So where would the building setback line be on this? It would be back further, it would be beyond that flag strip at this point.
I guess I'll let that go for tonight, but that kind of runs counter to an awful lot of the discussion that we had at great length back.
Sure, I guess I don't understand what we're getting at with the question. Are you asking if that lot could be created legally today?
That isn't the question I asked, but I guess you could answer it.
Probably not. We would not, we'd look at the land division ordinance, we'd look at that strip of land and say that doesn't make good sense to have that strip of land there, doesn't serve any purpose necessarily. So through the land division ordinance, we may not let that be created today.
Okay, so today, that would not even be a legal lot for a single residence.
I don't know if it wouldn't be legal, but we'd certainly try to persuade the petitioner from creating such a lot shape as it is.
Thank you.
And impervious clay. Can you put up that slide with, shows the soil borings? I think it's that second map.
Sure.
Oh, putting that up, man, maybe I can explain a little bit. I think the basis of some of your questions here is terminology and areas of interest that differ between geologists and soil scientists. And frankly, I'm neither a geologist nor a soil scientist. I'm a civil environmental engineer. But soil scientists are interested in the upper, 5 to 10 feet of soil generally. And geologists are interested in the geology from the ground surface all the way down below there. So, and at this location, from the well logs I saw, we have well over 100 feet of soil, I believe, from what I believe. The soil borings went, I don't know, went like 9 feet, roughly. So there is clay deeper that separates the upper water from the lower water. There's also, when you have lenses of clay that are shallow, you can have what's called a perched water table, which under the state statutes, a perched water table, if it's a saturated zone, is still called groundwater, but it's not groundwater that could be used for anything. Sometimes, often it can be seasonal, that's why you might see standing water there. It might be seasonal, and if you see standing water that's not in a wetland, most often it's going to be a perched water table being held there by tight soils, but most often with an unsaturated zone below.
Can I just maybe ask a question kind of back through the chair to redirect it again? I don't represent myself to be a geologist or soil scientist either. I understand the things of which you speak, and we may be a bit into terminology. I've got a really simple and specific question to you, Mr. Kessler, and that's for the 8 days that you've been on the job. Did you review his body of work with all the soil tests that he did?
Yes, I was furnished all the soil borings, and I did examine all the soil borings. So that does not make me an expert about soil borings.
The follow-up, and both of you can talk to it then, of these 25, are they reasonably consistent? Is there variation? And how far is the permeable sand, and where does the clay start?
Okay, that's the question I was going to answer for you. Could you go to the mic, please? Oh, thank you.
Okay, when I was called, I'm starting out, I don't know what's there, so as we were doing soil borings, I'm basically searching for areas that are suitable. So I document all the borings, whether they're the ones we end up identifying the system in or not. So that slide actually was the initial layout that they had, and the architect just drew those rectangles in there to represent where he thought would be an area to try for the soil borings. So that's where we started out, and there's probably 10 more borings that I think might not be on there.
There's one here, here.
Right, those are for the stormwater, so we're concentrating up in, right, up in,
How many borings were done total?
up in here. Right, so we ended up going back out and doing 10 more right in this area. So I don't know if you can see, but I think it's elevation 830, 832, 834, kind of right up in here. This is where we're setting the systems. And this is where all of the really good borings were. As we go down this way, that's why we start getting more of them closer, because this one wasn't very good. We moved a little farther away, and that one wasn't very good. And so this area here to be used would probably, you'd probably have a different type of system. It wouldn't be just a straight, regular, conventional system. But as they're planned, the systems are only going to be probably 2 to 4 feet right now. That'll be the system elevation below the grade. That way it's in the sand, but it gives us the optimum amount of treatment depth. So the minimum for any septic system is 3 feet of treatment. But in that area, I don't know if you have access to the soil test. I kind of thought you would have it.
The report is in the.
Yeah, but it shows a heavy dashed line around the system areas, and so if they exceeded that area would probably have to, the county would make sure we go out and do more borings. As long as we stay within that identified area, we know that we have the treatment depth, and it's probably 4 feet plus of treatment. It's not just at the minimum 3 foot. It's greater than that. But as we go down slope, that's where it starts to get less and less soil suitability. So that's why I concentrated the area in that one spot.
May I ask one last follow-up question, I guess, through the chair? And that would be in the best, you're basically saying the best soils for the
Correct.
on-site infiltration or
Right.
towards the northeast
We
corner of the
didn't find
property.
any lenses of different.
The question to you is in terms of gallons per square foot or what or not, what
Right.
kind of a loading rate is that best soil suitable for?
Well, what you have in the soil report, it's at the sand, the code sand, 0.7 gallons per square foot, which is the typical for an in-ground gravity flow effluent one type system.
Good. Thank you. And then the next question, I believe, was for the planner, the next public meeting and how it's related to the proceedings tonight.
Yeah, so you are correct, Supervisor Fisher. When I said that the next public hearing with the 30-day notice required by state statutes is scheduled for, I think you said April 18th, but it's actually April 12th. I'd said, I don't believe that has been posted and noticed yet. So my only comment was that anything could happen. I mean, the petition could remove withdraw his application. That wouldn't be held depending on what happens tonight.
I'm going to clarify that.
Sure.
As I have read the state statute for many years and has been adopted by all our other communities, is that if the Plan Commission does not approve this, it does not go to the town board. The Town Plan Commission is required under 66.1001, and I can point out the section for you, it does. 4 members of this Plan Commission have to approve it in order for it to move on.
And I appreciate that, deeply understand and agree with you. I may have a misunderstanding, though. I thought when Planner Malarkey, and I may have misunderstood this, I thought in your presentation that you said that the public participation procedures meeting, or whatever you want to call it, that is, I mean, is it right to call that mandated by state statute? We have to do that. I thought you said that that might not proceed depending on the outcome of tonight's meeting, and maybe I misunderstood.
I'll answer that question too. The public participation plan is required under statute 66.1001. As you've indicated, the town board has adopted a public participation plan. The staff has carefully monitored to make sure that that plan is being followed. It requires the posting of the background materials, which was done. It requires the potentiality of a public informational meeting, which was not done because your local ordinance requires a public hearing at the Plan Commission as well as the town board. And so in lieu of a public informational meeting, we're holding this public hearing to guide the Plan Commission. Does that make sense?
Not completely to me. I don't understand the linkage. I thought, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I thought the purpose of that was to talk globally about land use planning in the town's global master plan, not directed to a specific development.
The public participation plan? The public participation plan is required whether you do the initial plan or any amendment to the plan, be it a comprehensive plan or a parcel by parcel motion. You have to follow your public participation plan.
Okay, I guess we're talking past each other then a bit. Let's pretend this wasn't even happening tonight, okay? And we don't have a specific proposal, a specific petitioner before us. Do we have to do that public participation meeting? And I thought that's what we resolved to do back in January. Do we have to do that in April or April 12th if we weren't even here about this tonight?
No. That's not consistent with your public participation plan. You have a plan. It has certain aspects to that plan. I was walking through the aspects of that plan because I thought you were asking whether we've satisfied the necessities of that plan, and you have.
I'm trying for the minute to decouple this proceeding with the mandates of the state statute 66.1014A. I'm trying to decouple those completely. Do we have to do the public participation procedure in hearing in accordance with Wisconsin state statutes if we had nothing before us tonight whatsoever? I want to decouple those, and that's the answer I'm seeking.
No. If you're not writing a plan or amending a plan, the public participation plan requirement does not come into play. So you can decouple them, but it's not in some void that every 6 months or every year or every month you have to follow a public participation plan. It's part of the process for adopting or amending a comprehensive plan. That's the only time the public participation activities and procedures come into play.
Can I take a stab at this? I think what I'm hearing you say, and I just want to try to reword it because, as you said, it sounds like maybe you're talking past each other. What I'm understanding you to say is, if the town board was just considering changing the land use plan from current commercial office to residential, there was no petitioner. We were just considering making this plan. What I think I'm hearing you ask the attorney is, would we have to follow our public participation plan?
I'm going to just back up. For me, it's even a little bit simpler than that, and it has nothing to do with this property. My question is, maybe I misunderstood it. We have a land use plan that has been in place for many years. I guess it goes back to 2009, and I don't think it's been revisited. We haven't had public participation or comment. It hasn't been revisited at all. My question is, does either the requirement, the spirit or what or not of 66.1014A, is there some expectation that we need from time to time to hold a public hearing, public participation procedures, even if nobody is contemplating any specific proposal to do anything? So I'm backing it all the way out to that, and that's my question.
Well, do you have the plan in front of you? You can answer it first.
I don't have a copy of the plan in front of me, but the answer is no. The only reason that public participation plan is in place and the public hearings are involved is, as Attorney Macy mentioned, is if you're contemplating amending your plan as the town, or if a petitioner petitions to amend the plan. That's the only reason we're following those procedures. Any other issue, someone comes forward for a rezone or a conditional use, you follow state statutes for public hearings, but this is intrinsic and specific to comprehensive plan amendments only.
Okay, then I guess it answers, and maybe get a bit clearer, then I guess it begs the question to me, if it's this proposal that is prompting us to schedule that public participation procedure meeting on the 12th of April, why wouldn't we be doing that before this hearing is closed? Then it seems backwards to me if this is what's triggering that. Maybe somebody can help you with that.
Well, this is the first step in the process. So our comprehensive plan requires this hearing, this joint public hearing, to take place regardless of what the state statutes say. In addition to that, the state statutes require a public hearing with the board, which requires a 30-day notice. What Attorney Macy was saying is unless the Plan Commission recommends this for approval, it doesn't go anywhere and it stops, and that's why it hasn't been noticed and published for the next meeting. I mentioned it as the next step in the process, depending on what happens tonight, whether the petitioner would withdraw or the Plan Commission would recommend denial. So it hasn't happened, hasn't been published because we're just not there yet.
Okay, then, and I think I'm getting closer. Let me ask it another way.
I can answer your question.
No, let me just ask it once more. If it was the will of the Plan Commission to recommend and the town board to approve the land use amendment tonight, then we're not going to have a meeting on the 12th of April?
The town board cannot approve tonight. The Plan Commission can recommend, the town board cannot entertain an action until after the public hearing on April 12th.
Okay, well, now we got someplace. That's, thank you. That's where I've been trying to get to for 15 minutes. I get it. I didn't know that until now, but I appreciate knowing that. Thank you.
As long as the question was answered, it was a well-spent 15 minutes.
It was indeed. Thank you.
All right, standing water. I believe that came from Commissioner Stigler.
Thank you. I did discuss earlier perched water tables and the unsaturated zones that can occur under a perched water table and seasonal high groundwater. Did that answer your questions? I don't know if you want to go through the chair or just make sure you get your question answered.
No, this came from Commissioner Stigler.
Yeah, I did. I guess I'm not sure it does answer that. If we've got standing water on there, how does that relate? I mean, I understand just talking a perched water table. How does, I'm kind of concerned, and if we have water standing on these properties, if we put houses on them or whatever, I don't think that's allowable really, is it? I mean, you don't want standing water in your yard.
I indicated in my review letter that there are really two things that contribute to standing water on the surface. One would be the topography, you know, if you have a dip or a depression where it can collect water, and the other would be really to tight soils where the water couldn't seep through fast enough to disappear immediately after the storm event. And in case of a depression in the topography, this whole site's going to be regraded, and any depression that might be holding water, I would presume is going to be taken care of. In the case of tight soils, that would indicate further evidence that shallow percolating water, including sewage water from the soil absorption system, isn't going to contaminate the deeper groundwater that's used as a drinking water source. Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
I don't believe there'd be any, where we have the septic system sited, I didn't see any indications at all of saturation or ponding. But as you move downhill, you know, I don't know what kind of farming practices have been done. You know, there's sometimes heavy equipment. You know, if you ever have a little travel lane, you see puddling oftentimes.
This was pretty significant ponding, and
Well,
and you're talking about
how far from the
excavation and stuff, and
Yeah.
usually smeared clay, that kind of closes up the pores, and you have less infiltration after you're done grading on properties.
Well, in the area of the septic system, there isn't any of that.
But you said before, though, south of there, then it becomes more dicey as far as percolation, correct?
That's right. That's why we're identifying that area furthest north.
Is there enough area there to handle this much sewage?
Right, yeah, it's identified in the report, and that's at the regular septic treatment rate. If John did go with aerobic treatment, that has basically the ability, because it's 90% treated in the drain, in the tank, the water won't build a clogging layer. So we can have a lot higher infiltration rate, probably double. So it's twice as big as necessary, with 2 or 3 times the treatment depth. So the safety factors are just magnitudes larger when you use the aerobic treatment.
Thank you. The next question was overflow of storm water into the wetland. Did that come from Mr. White?
Yes, we have special requirements from Waukesha County and DNR that the sediment has to be removed from the water. So that it settles out in that pond, it tops off, goes through a structure or overflows through the weir, and it's clean at that point. So, I mean, what we don't want is to keep water from getting to the wetlands. I mean, it's wet, it needs the water. So we treat it and then it gets released to it. So it's, you know, it's clean, and so we gotta meet the requirements, we will get the permit. And then there was one comment about the creek.
Yes,
We'll definitely expand our plans to show that, where that creek is located at. So.
Yeah, he was looking for a delineation between the wetland and the creek, from the creek.
The wetlands have been delineated, that's been delineated, there's a report on it. But for the creek, they had asked too, I mean, we can just show it on a plan, that way there's no debate whether it's 600 feet or 200 feet, we can show that.
Did that answer those 2 questions,
No,
Commissioner?
I'm just kind of curious, how close is it to the wetlands that you guys will be dumping the storm water into? How close is that point there?
Well, you're 30 feet away, there's a buffer along the wetlands.
Well, my question when they said, and go back to your report, that you had to be 300 feet. And I'm just trying to determine what's going on in this creek.
Yeah, so
Because everybody's been bouncing around with it.
Right, so the most updated plan shows the creek, and if you look at the aerial on the screen here, and it's a little hard to see, the southwest corner of the site, there's a creek that runs through the wetland. Okay, it's part of the wetland complex. So the issue is, if it's navigable, then the county would have shoreline jurisdiction surrounding that.
And I asked that 2 meetings ago to get that clarified, and it hasn't been clarified, it was navigable.
Right, and we addressed that in the staff reports, and I mentioned it was still outstanding. The petitioner stated that request is in process, and they have not had a determination yet. I guess the latest and greatest on it is, they have showed the line from the creek, and they've shown a 300-foot buffer on it, and it doesn't, though it comes past the wetland line, it doesn't coincide with any building footprints, and the way the county stated it was that if it doesn't overlap any building footprints, then county shoreline zoning wouldn't be a factor here in terms of regulation of the buildings and having to rezone county shoreline jurisdiction as well. So we're still asking for that as any condition of approval for any of these comp plan, rezoning, PUD, that gets determined and the county takes a look at it just to make sure that there's no issues. So that's still on the table.
I just know that area a little bit. I just know there's multiple streams that actually enter that Red Ring Creek. One actually comes directly underneath 164.
This one actually isn't Red Wing.
Okay.
Red Wing is on the property to the south that's currently owned by Waukesha County. This one is an unnamed creek that's on the subject property. So that's the one we're talking about, not Red Wing.
Right, and that creek actually comes from underneath 164. That's where it actually originates from.
And then you had additional questions about the traffic study related to peak times?
Yeah, I guess my question was, you have the Bible Church, you have Coonsey Family Pet Hospital, you got the Sticks Academy, you got the sports training facility, and plus you have the residents coming off of Glendale Road. Okay, so that's a number of people at a peak time. That I know where I live, I have to exit onto 164, and I may sit there for 30 to 40 seconds for me to enter, and I just can't believe if these all come to a peak time, there's gonna be a train sitting there of cars.
So, did you have a question about it?
Well,
or-
my question is, this traffic study was done, I'm wondering if the town should do their own traffic study and come up there with their own numbers instead of going what the petitioner presented.
Okay. And I think that's all that I had.
Can I ask just one follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
There
sir.
would be, I don't know, maybe Mr. Maloney can answer, maybe Mr. Janelli or whatnot, but with the stormwater management plan as you envision it, is there a requirement design standard for removal of suspended solids that you're heading towards? Can you tell us what it is, please?
It's 80% of the solids needs to be removed.
Thank you.
We have 5 letters that need to be read into the record that we've received on this.
Dear members of the Waukesha Town Board, we are writing in favor of the townhouse development on Glendale on Highway 164. We feel that the town needs this type of rural development for residents who wish to live in a small community in a rural area but are unwilling or unable to maintain a large acreage. This development would benefit the town by putting this parcel on land and housing on the town tax rolls. This parcel is presently zoned for a school, but we have lived in the town for 44 years and have heard of no plans for a school on this parcel. With a combination of ranch and 2-story housing, senior citizens and younger citizens can be accommodated. It could give this small community a diversified population. The plan also would preserve wetlands and green space. With the proximity to Highway 164, the residents would be using a state highway for much of their transportation needs. Highway 164 already has a 4-way stoplight for the safety of the cars entering from Glendale. The developer has demonstrated a need for this type of housing.
Quiet, can we be quiet, please? He's reading a letter that was sent in verbatim. Okay, thank you.
The developer has demonstrated a need for this type of housing in the town with the success of his overlook development in the town of Waukesha. He has preserved trees, green space, and wetlands in the overlook development. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration, Betty Paget and Ed Paget. Then I have a letter for Baxter and Woodman. Subject qualifications and support wetland delineation for parcel WAKT 1429999. Dear Chairman Merrick, I perform a wetland delineation for parcel WAKT 1429999 in accordance with the Corps of Engineers Wetland Delineation Manual, Regional Supplement of the Corps of Engineers Wetland Delineation Manual, North Central and Northeast Region, version 2.0. And NRCS farmed wetland methodology, which is the acceptable method to conduct wetland delineation.
Can you say my name again?
Please.
Angie Vansack, South 51, West 25375 Glendale Road. It's been a long evening already. I think we started at 6, got to be close to 8:30. And there's a ton of stuff that people have questions on that I don't hear a lot of answers for. And this particular process is faster than normal because you've chosen to do all 3 meetings in one. I think it's going to be a heck of a lot shorter, and I think there's going to be lots of time for discussion because I don't believe you can act on the comprehensive plan change tonight. It was not properly noticed. It was in the newspaper, but the language in the newspaper for the posting is different than the amended agenda that was put out yesterday. So with not having proper notice and not giving people proper notice to move forward on this project at any level would be contrary to ordinance. And I would not expect you to take that route.
Thank you.
Steve Galloway spoke earlier, S53 West 23805 Glendale Road. I heard a lot of supervisors ask a lot of very technical questions of most of the people up here, but I didn't hear any questions from the residents to the residents about our quality of life, why we live here. I know a lot of people spoke, but nobody wanted to talk about that again. And that's why we've got all of you up here to represent us. And that's what I'm not really understanding. So I understand there are a lot of questions about exterior and water flow and all that, but that type of thing. And I heard about the comprehensive plan. It sounds like a lot of smart people put time into that. And now we're going to deviate and amend that so that one person can profit. I can't even comprehend that. So nothing against John, he's a businessman, good guy, and all that stuff. And my last comment is, and don't take this the wrong way, but because of your relationship to the chairman, I don't know how any of you can make an unbiased decision in any of this. I really don't. It's gonna affect your future relationship with him, so I don't see how that's even gonna happen. Thanks.
Attorney Macy, I know you were diligently reading the letters you were given. And I'm really not as familiar with that intersection as I should be, but I heard the crowd go up when you read that there was a stoplight at Glendale and 164. And maybe someone can answer that for me, but I don't think there is. I think it's at Lonsdale and 164 by the Fox River Christian Church, but no light at all at Glendale. So the letter writer was in error, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve Sensky again, South 44, West 23, 684, Whispering Hills Court. So I've heard this go on now all night long. We've heard the experts, we've heard the plan, we see the pictures. None of us probably can understand what we're looking at here with all the contours and everything else. So it's up really to the planning commission to make this decision. What I can tell you is you're looking at concerned citizens that are very vocally against this project for any one of a number of different reasons. I'm sure the city of Waukesha years and years and years ago didn't think they'd be looking to Milwaukee to get water for the city of Waukesha. I'm sure they didn't plan that. I hear a lot of the experts saying, I believe this, I believe this. They're not saying this is the way it is. They're saying, I believe this. Nobody can predict what this is going to do in the future. And you talk about commercial development. Look at what commercial development has gone on in the last 2 years in this area. Look at Sunset Drive. Look at all the businesses that are coming in there now. What's to say that you aren't going to have just as many businesses clamoring for that 164 corridor? You can't say that based on the last 25 years that nothing has gone there and nothing's going to be put there for another 25 years. You can't say that. Because when I first bought in the town of Waukesha, I was actually in the city of Waukesha first. And there was a Century plant where all this development is now. So you can't sit there and say that because we haven't had anybody look at this area for 25 years, it isn't going to happen in the next couple of years. You can't say that. There's too much stuff going on around us right now with the road construction and the different things that are coming into Waukesha. This is prime real estate for development. And to turn this into something that nobody in the town wants to see except John is beyond ludicrous. It makes no sense. You know, you're in a position to either alienate the entire town or support the people that are here concerned and talking and expressing their views. That decision is up to you guys, whether or not you want to bypass all of the opinions here and all the people that are against this and vote for this I still haven't heard anybody say, nuts and bolts, what is this going to mean for my taxes? Am I going to get $1,000 off my taxes because of this? Or are they not going to raise because of this? My taxes haven't raised in 20 years appreciably. I wouldn't expect that they're going to all of a sudden be raised by another 20 years. Let's concentrate on the things that are important. Let's concentrate on the fire department. Let's concentrate on the police department. Let's do the business for the town and not for an individual that stands to gain and profit from something that nobody in this town wants. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission members, and supervisors. It's an absolute disingenuous statement. There's 9,301 people in this town. There's 50 of them here speaking. By his logic, the other 9,250 people in this town want this project because they're not here. And the only reason these people are here is because the guy that doesn't want it wants the land. That's the bottom line.
Ladies and gentlemen, you won't hear from me again tonight. Brad Anderson, West 265, South 3700 Donald Drive. I've been at many town board meetings over the years, and I think you can all agree. When we have a crowd at the town hall, regardless if it's 10, 20, 30 people, if it's a general planning commission meeting or a town board meeting, maybe a handful of people are here. But when we have this many people here, it's a concern to probably a good majority of the town residents. I think you'd all agree with that with me. From my experience of sitting in town board meetings and seeing what takes place at town board meetings, when we have a turnout like this tonight, it isn't that the other 9,000 and some other individuals want it. It's just because people have a different way of expressing themselves. Some people just don't care. Some people just don't read the public notices and things like that. But some of you out here tonight are elected officials. And somewhere in your campaign promise, I'm sure you said, I will work for you, I will work for the citizen, and I will also work for the benefit of the town of Waukesha. But your first primary mission is to represent the public. And I think tonight, as the other gentleman stated, that the consensus of the majority that are here tonight, they just feel this is a bad idea. No personal vendettas or attacks against Mr. Merrick. I know John, he's always been very decent with me and I consider him my friend. But there are just some things that are not good for the town. And those of you that are elected officials here, you should take into account tonight that the people that put you in this position, they're not in favor of this. So thank you, sorry, Bud.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I just make just a constructive suggestion that either you or maybe Mr. Macy would just take just a minute? I think there may be a bit of a kind of a misunderstanding in the audience, or maybe people who are watching on YouTube. The public hearing here is not the point in time in which the plan commissioners and town board members are going to respond, to engage in debate, deliberation, discord. I mean, this is a hearing to ask questions, to get information. Could one of you, maybe Mr. Macy, could do that? Could you kind of clear that up for people, because I think they're looking at people as being non-responsive, or just understand what the procedure is, if there's a time and place for that, and it really isn't now.
Certainly, Mr. Supervisor. The process by which the town of Waukesha and almost every other community, I think every community operates, is that they have their report from their staff, then they have the presentation by the petitioner, and then they take the comments and questions from the public. We don't allow this process tonight is followed exactly the way most of them, almost all of them follow it, where they write down the questions, they have the experts answer the questions, they get all the information, and because the board is going to have to make their decision, the plan commission is going to have to make their decision based on the information presented at the public hearing and submitted with the application. And before we close the public hearing, we generally then listen to the plan commissioners as to whether they're ready to close the public hearing and not ready to close the public hearing. Even at that point, they don't express their opinion. They shouldn't express their opinion, their final opinion for sure, until the hearing's closed, because that would be prejudging the information that you're going to receive at the hearing. So if the gentleman, if you're interpreting, and maybe I am too, the gentleman saying, well, how come we're not getting your comments? That would be totally inappropriate, and I would stop you from giving your comments because the public hearing isn't closed or near closed. You have to make your opinion based on the testimony. Does that answer your question, Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thank you.
All right.
Chairman?
Yes.
I got one more question real quick. This may go back out to the engineer. On the staff review sheet where it says, the overview part on that paragraph where it says town comprehensive development plan, smart growth map amendment from the commercial office and environmental corridor to low density residential 20,000 square feet /1 acre and environmental corridor. It almost mimics exactly the same one in the county comprehensive development plan, except where it says 1.4 acres. Can you tell me what the verbiage difference or what that would change anything on anything at all?
You're asking specifically the difference between the town's category and the county's
Yeah,
category?
or is the county recommending that their square footage of the 20,000 square feet goes to 1.4 acres versus our 1 acre?
Right.
in town?
It just happens that the towns and the county's comprehensive plan districts are not one-to-one matches. So our closest representation of what's being proposed here for the development density would match our 20,000 square feet to 1 acre low-density residential development pattern. The county's closest district that they can match it up to is 1.5 to 2.9 acres. So the development wouldn't change, it just happens to be those are the only categories that are, that this development is kind of slotted into for each respective plan.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions related to the request for the change in the comprehensive land use plan?
David German, South 53, West 24395 Glendale Road. Mr. White, also Susan King with the Wisconsin DOT. I have her email and I can give you her information. Because I contacted them about this, they were not very happy that there was not a traffic study done for the Sticks building nor this. So that's why they were out there yesterday.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. So if I understand this, if you go back in time, in 1992, the Larsons sold their farm to the state of Wisconsin, and the intention was they were going to build a school. If I remember right, it was a planned high school. So had that all worked, then the demographics of the kids not changed, today we'd be looking at a high school sitting there?
I don't know the year, but my understanding was that there was to be a school there.
Okay.
Any other questions for the comprehensive land use plan? All right, we will look to close the public hearing. That's where I'm going, thank you. We will look to close the public hearing on number 1, specifically to amend the comprehensive plan from commercial office and commercial corridor to low-density residential and environmental corridor. I'd like to go down the line and ask from my right to my left, each, if you are ready and have the information that you would need to make a decision, not that you would be making a decision.
May I ask one question first, just as a matter of personal privilege, it might help answer that?
Please.
I'm wondering if either of you or perhaps Attorney Macy could simply lay out for us, I mean, we either have to close the hearing or allow it to remain open. We have to take one of those two choices tonight, is that correct?
That is correct.
One or the other? Okay, could you just lay out the scenarios under each option? If this public hearing is closed, then what happens downstream with the other hearings, the Plan Commission, the Town Board, and the public participation meeting on April 12th? And if it's left open, is that any different? I mean, what are the scenarios downstream or the consequences of either closing this public hearing or leaving it open? Can you outline that for me, please?
I will try. I wasn't very good last time, but I'll try. The Plan Commission mainly has to decide whether or not they want to close this public hearing. It's a joint hearing with the town board, but we have to, that they have enough information, because the town board is going to hold another public hearing if the Plan Commission adopts a resolution recommending the change. Okay? So, I'll start again. You have to decide if you're going to hold it open. If you hold it open, you have to, we recommend you adjourn it to a time and date certain. That can be anything more than 24 hours, because Kathy has to notice the meeting for 24 hours, or, to your next meeting, or whatever time and date certain you want to hold it open, that would be that as your chairman, acting chairman has indicated, you don't have enough information. If you adjourn the public hearing, you have to take comments from everybody who shows up at the next public hearing. That's not good or bad, that's just a fact. It's an adjourned public hearing, and you take testimony at the adjourned public hearing, just like you took testimony tonight. That one is, if you close the public hearing, obviously then you decide whether you're going to adopt, the Plan Commission decides whether they're going to adopt the resolution or not adopt the resolution tonight, or to put that off to another date also. This is not on the following town board agenda. That was the comment that the planner was making. This is not for action for the town board tonight pursuant to the state statute. They have to wait 30 days before they can act. Because it has to be mailed out to certain entities before the final public hearing can be held and can be acted. As for the conditional use and the rezoning, that would be a policy decision based on what you decide in regards to the comprehensive plan public hearing. It is noticed, you're going to have to convene it. If you're going to adjourn it, you have to convene it. But as to whether you're going to hold the full hearing or not, again, is a policy decision. Because I can't tell you what you're going to do. It's sort of a step-by-step. But if you close this public hearing, we would go on to the other two public hearings. That's the way it's. If you don't close this public hearing, we will start the next public hearing, and then the board will have to decide whether they're going to hear everything tonight or put it over. I mean, that's your option. That's not a legal question, that's a policy decision. Thank you.
Okay. So for the planning commission members, starting with my right, working to my left, which would be Commissioner Flanagan.
Well, I'm ready to close the public hearing, but I have a question.
Very good.
Are we gonna stay here until 2 in the morning?
We could. It's been done before.
Well, I know, but I guess it doesn't make any sense. Think about it. I mean, this absolutely makes no sense. What are we gonna hear from the same people in this audience 3 hours from now that we haven't already heard?
Mr. Flanagan, I've asked your acting chairman whether or not he will give me permission to ask the Plan Commission in regards to the next two hearings, whether or not they would be willing to incorporate all of the testimony from the prior hearing into that hearing and made part of the record so people would not have to, they still could, we can't stop them, they have their right to speak at the next public hearings, but we would announce that the Plan Commission, if they're of a mind to do so, would incorporate all of the information and the letters from the first public hearing into the second public hearing, and then ultimately into the third public hearing. That won't stop people from talking, they have every right to talk, I don't want anyone to misinterpret it, but that allows you legally to consider all of that information when making your decision on the conditional use and rezoning. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
And I thought I heard you say that you're ready to close?
I'm ready to close.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner.
I'm also with Bob, if we can come back and regroup that, I've got enough information.
Okay, thank you. I have additional minutes, okay. Commissioner Miller.
Does there need to be a motion?
Ultimately, you'll be making a motion whether to close the public hearing or not.
No, I mean the co-joining of the information.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, when we open the public hearing, to either all as consensus agree. I can't tell you whether you're going to incorporate it. I can just ask you if you were wanting to. And we might make it as a motion, Mr. Miller, just to make the record clear.
Thank you. I'm ready.
Okay. Commissioner Stigler, yes?
I'm ready.
Yes. All right, so very good. With that, I will close public hearing number 1 regarding the amendment to the comprehensive plan from